whether it's a good sunset or a good one of the solstices, this is the summer solstice, or rainbows in the sky, rainbows in the dark with the moon, or the super blue blood moon from a few years ago. I just enjoy shooting the stars. And it is interesting, you know, everybody starts somewhere on their journey. Some of you are experienced nighttime photographers. Some of you are just getting started. And we all have to start somewhere. But the key thing is getting started. So a little bit about my journey. I have several friends who are amateur astronomers. We went up to Palomar, and that's my picture on the right there. That's under the red lights. They take the dark sky so serious there that even the bathrooms have the red lights in them. So this is a selfie in the men's room, but with the red there. And I started wanting at that same time, my friend Steve Wormser, he was putting out some of his workshops, and he took this picture of a star trail, and I was just enthralled. How did he do this in Joshua Tree? Oh my word, if I could ever take a picture like this in Joshua Tree under the night sky, I just thought that would be amazing. So I started with the biggest thing I could find, which was the moon. I knew that you had to take picture after picture after picture, and so I started to take pictures of the moon, and so I got that. So the next thing I tried to take was a picture of the next thing in the sky that I could recognize, which was the Milky Way. I'm sorry, the Big Dipper. I could take a picture of the Big Dipper. And so I'm in the backyard. You can see when I'm walking in and out of the house, the lights flashing. You know, I bumped the tripod a couple of times, but I had some raw pictures. I had some pictures that I could put through the Star Trail program, and I came up with this. And this was my very first Star Trail, and I was so excited. I had no idea how I did it in terms of getting the center. You know, how did I didn't know exactly how I got the trails at that point, but I was excited that I had something, and that was the impetus that it took me. And this was a star trail that I took this last year. Dave Card and I were out at Quail Springs, and so we've come a long way, baby. And so I'm very pleased at. It's nice to see progress in your photography. All right, everything's easy once you know how. Duh, but you do have to start somewhere, and it's easy. Everything's easy in hindsight. So first, you got to figure out, when it comes to Milky Way photography, where are you going to shoot? And we are very fortunate here on the West Coast. In the East Coast, you can see there's lots and lots of light pollution. We are very fortunate here in Southern California to have lots of dark sky, relatively close dark sky access. So you want to be looking for dark skies. There's something they call a Bortle system. And I got this slide off of skyglowproject.com. They help with educating the public on light pollution. But you can see here, the lower you go, the better it is. So if you can get out of the suburban, out of the city, into the dark skies where you have Bortles, Bortle is the system, 3, 2, or 1, you can experience much better Milky Way success. The Joshua Tree, you can see that's Joshua Tree right here in the middle. That has a good dark sky area. But just because you go to a dark sky, there's more to it than that. So another good place to look for dark sky areas is the darksky.org. It's another organization that helps classify dark sky areas for preservation. And that's a very helpful website there. So I knew that I needed to go to a dark sky area. I had my astronomer friend, I said, let's go out. It was March. And so we went out. I have this picture hanging on my wall in the house. It's beautiful. I couldn't wait to take pictures of the Milky Way. I look outside and it was beautiful, lots of stars. But I asked him, where's the Milky Way? And he looked at me funny. He goes, it doesn't show up until about 3 in the morning. And I was like, what? I was under the impression all you needed was dark skies to see the Milky Way. And there's actually a season for that. So you have to know when to shoot as well. So not only where, but when. And so Milky Way has a season, and it's coming up. In fact, May through August is peak Milky Way season. And that's going right now. This is a great time to prepare for that. If anybody needs to mute themselves, go ahead and do that. There's somebody who has their microphone on, if you could please mute. But May through August is peak Milky Way season. And we are on the cusp, just entering into April. You can see the Milky Way here. It's just you have a very, very short window. Rick Strobo and I were out in the Milky Way, and last year, Dave Card and we went out in March. And there was about a 2-hour window that you could see the Milky Way before sunrise. And so you could take advantage of that. It's just you don't get as much bang for your buck. Or if I drive 2 hours and I have a two-hour drive back, I want to at least shooting for that amount of time. So if you go in later in the season, you get some much better Milky Way viewing. So when we're talking about can you see the Milky Way, we're talking about the core. This beautiful part right in here. The core is what most people want to shoot. The Milky Way actually continues this way. It just gets fades and fades and fades. It also goes this way, but in the northern hemisphere, we can't see that. So in the southern hemisphere, there's a whole other side to the Milky Way. So from this core, it goes to the left and to the right. But what happens over time and in the nighttime, the Milky Way starts to go underneath the horizon. So if you're talking about August, September, October, you can't see a good chunk of the Milky Way, and you'll see that here in a moment. So not only where to shoot the Milky Way, when to shoot the Milky Way in the seasons, you also have to be aware of the moon phases. And ever since I started shooting the moon, or shooting the Milky Way, I've become much more aware of the seasons. So you want to shoot under a new moon. That's ideal. A waxing moon, waxing crescent over here, or a waning crescent are also good. So you got about 5 days left or right of a new moon. That's kind of your window in order to shoot the Milky Way. Under a new, and let me show you the difference. This is a Joshua Tree over at White Tank. And you can see the Milky Way here. It's very, very faded. This is the same shot or the same location here under a new moon, and you've got a lot more Milky Way that you can see. This area down here, that is light pollution. And so light pollution is definitely one of those things you want to be taking into consideration. Last thing about when to shoot is you can't, just because the sun has set doesn't mean you can see everything yet. It takes about an hour and a half after sunset, or an hour and a half before sunrise is when it's actually officially night. So it's good to get to your location during the daytime before sunset in here, use this time, use this hour and a half to spot, set your camera up, do what you need to do, find out your locations, get all ready to go. So when it's night, so for example, I'm going to ask Siri here. Siri, when is sunset?
Sunset was at 7:13 p.m. today.
Okay, so 7:13, let's call that 7:15. So an hour and a half after that, official night begins. That would be right at, well, hour and a half after 7:15. So whenever that is. So let me hit pause here and see if they have any questions so far. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question. No questions? All right, somebody's not muted. Let me see. Carol, I'm gonna mute you.
Bruce,
Yes.
I do have a question with regard to that. Can you also, not only do you deal with the phases of the moon, but if you have a late moonrise or early moonrise type of thing, can that impact what you're working with?
Absolutely. Sometimes a little bit of moon is actually helpful, especially if you're to light a landscape. That can be very, very helpful. So we're just talking about when you want shooting the sky part. You want the darkest skies possible, but they definitely can help with foreground. So a lot of people will shoot here in the blue hour, which is right in this area, nautical twilight. That's kind of during this period of time is blue hour. And so shooting at blue hour, opposed to golden hour, we're all familiar with golden hour. Blue hour is really good for the foreground, and then you shoot your background separate.
Hey Bruce, I had a quick question. It had more to do with location where you're shooting from. Do you get a better view of the Milky Way if you go further closer to the equator?
You'll get a different view. I don't necessarily say that it's better, but you'll definitely get a different view. You'll see more of the core the further south you go. And so a lot of people get excited about that. So absolutely. You'll also start to see some of the southern hemisphere star clusters and galaxies and things of that nature.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ann.
Can you hear me? Okay. When I was at Joshua Tree, there were two problems. There were the flight, the jet lines, what do they call them?
The airplane?
Yeah, a lot of the jet flares in the sky that I had to take out.
Yep.
And there was also there was a substantial amount of light from the city beyond. Do you have offhand like places around here that you recommend that would be even darker than Joshua Tree?
Well, Joshua Tree has the north side and the south side. The south side by the 10, that's actually a lot darker, but it doesn't have any of the Joshua trees on the south side. So I don't like it as much just because it doesn't have any foreground beauty or a different kind of foreground beauty. Frank, you've shot down in Joshua Tree. What are your thoughts?
I'm a strong proponent of the school that says get the very best sky that you can get, which means going to the darkest place you can find. And then if you want to put a foreground in it, get the best foreground you can get and ignore the sky in that location. So for me, the best sky, the nearest really good sky is just inside the south entrance to Joshua Tree National Park. That's the darkest in our area.
It is. You can also go an hour past Joshua Tree on the north side, and you actually go one border down. But it is an hour past it, which means it's so it's 2 hours round trip. So
right, and you can go into Death Valley and find one more zone of darkness there for your additional travel.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Yep. So let me go ahead and continue here.
There you go. Come sit down.
All right. So a couple of helpful apps that I found to,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Closer now.
I lost my presentation. Here we go.
I'll make some notes here.
All right, somebody's not muted. If you could mute yourself, please. And I'm gonna go to the eraser. Boom. Okay, Stellarium. Stellarium is a wonderful app. This actually is an app both for your iPhone, your iPad, your Android. They also have a desktop app, which I'm gonna shift to now. I'm gonna share Stellarium with you because it's just fantastic. It has the best price in the world of free. And it's actually one of those free programs that is helpful. So this is going to show you the night sky as it exists right now. So the moon's coming up. You could see Venus over here. And the best part here is you can actually change the date and the time. So you can walk through exactly when things are going to show. So right now, the Milky Way under a full moon can hardly be seen, but there's going to be a new moon on April the 22nd. So I can see here exactly when the Milky Way is going to be in position. Low on the horizon right after midnight, 1:30. 2:30. And so I can also back up and see, aha, the Milky Way is going to arch. I can see the Milky Way arch here in the sky. So if you're going to do a Milky Way arch, for example, you have to do it relatively early in the season. April, May is going to be your best time. But this is at 2:30 in the morning. So if you're into that kind of thing, here's where it gets a lot higher in the sky. So I'm going to move here straight to the south. I'm going to move in here a little bit. And let's just look from month by month what's happening. I'm going to move it from April to May. You can see it's moving different parts in the sky. I'm here in July. Now at 3 in the morning, it's way over to the right. And see, you can see how it's kind of going underneath the horizon. So in July, you can get the Milky Way very nicely done in a good position here for a lot, right after sunset, it's right up in the sky. But you'll never be able to take an arch because it's way too high in the sky. It's way too high in the sky. So I find Stellarium to be incredibly helpful, and you can also just move it right along. You can fast forward time, and you can see exactly where it's going to go, where it's going to be. You can plan your shots that way. Another thing you can do is put on the constellations, so you can see what the things are called, which is helpful if you're learning the night sky that way. You can speed up time really, very fast, like the time machine. Hopefully nobody gets what is that called, where they freak out and get ellipsis. Okay, now going back to my PowerPoint. So Stellarium is incredible. It's a great program. It's free. Highly recommend it. Sky Guide is another program that I recommend. This is an app for your phone. And so let's say you're trying to find Polaris. You just pull it up, type in Polaris. And if you've seen Jack Sparrow's compass on the Pirates of the Caribbean, you get the little arrow and it points to exactly what you want. So if you move to a different part of the sky, it's still going to show exactly where Polaris is. It'll also show some of your other night sky objects. So Sky Guide is it's iPhone only, but it's a tremendous app. The app for the PC is Skyview Lite. That's one. Another app that I recommend is PhotoPills. This is, I think it's $10 or something, which for an app is very expensive, but it's totally worth it. They have some great planning tools, but my favorite is this augmented reality view, where, for example, for the super blue blood moon that was here, I was able to see exactly where the path that the moon was going to take, which was very helpful. Also for Milky Way, this was in end of May 30th, or actually this was June the 2nd. I wanted to get the Milky Way. I was at the Juniper and Monolith, wanted to get the Milky Way right between the two. And I saw that I had to be there up at 2 in the morning in order to do it. And so that was the plan, and this was the shot. So it really helps pre-visualization that way. This is Borrego. I wanted the dinosaur here blowing out the Milky Way with his breath. So this was the plan, and then this was the shot. So let me go ahead and hit pause, and any questions on the apps? Go ahead and unmute yourself. No questions on the apps. So it's those three apps are Stellarium, Skyview, and PhotoPills. Just incredibly helpful when it comes to that. Okay, so let's talk gear. So you're definitely going to need a camera, but before even that, you're going to need a flashlight. A good flashlight is a must. A nice sturdy tripod. Don't go, tripods are an investment, but they're totally worth it. A camera, most modern cameras have the high ISO capabilities. You're going to need for the Milky Way shooting and for star trails, a fast and wide lens is helpful, and then an intervalometer. I use the Chameleon CU6. I had my son-in-law hunt down flashlights. I like this one because it also has red for astro viewing, which it helps protect the eyes. It also has infrared when you're scorpion hunting.
Can you go back one, please, Bruce, on that list of equipment? Thank you.
Flashlight, tripod, camera, and lens. And I'm going to go through each one of these.
Okay, thanks.
So flashlight, a headlamp is helpful. I find a headlamp is, and if you're with any astro guys, they're going to want a red light, and this one happens to have one. Tripod, this is one of my early setups. I use a Manfrotto one right now. It's much sturdier, but when you're getting started, you start what you have. This was my battery pack here that I had connected to my iPhone, which I use as my intervalometer, and that connects up here. And this was a Rebel I was shooting at the time. Now I use a Canon 6D, which is known, it's actually the 6D in my astrophotography circles. Even as old as it is, it's one of the more popular, surprisingly, one of the more popular cameras, partly because it's so cheap, and you can get a relatively good glass on it if you use some cheap wide angle glass. LonelySpec.com is a fantastic website, and what this slides, Lonely Spec specializes in Milky Way editing, and here you can see on a 35 millimeter how much. This is a 50 millimeter, how much sky you can see, and of course the smaller you go, the wider you get. Personally, my favorite right now, I have a 24 millimeter, I use a 24 to 70, and then I have a 15 millimeter, so I can do both these angles right here, wider. I actually like the 24 a little bit better for for the part of the Milky Way I like to shoot, but you can definitely get You can definitely get both there. This is a 50 millimeter. This is the Nifty 50. So 50 millimeter, Nifty 50, $99. Can you take pictures of the Milky Way and at night? Yep, absolutely you can. Maybe it's not going to be the sharpest, and at 50 millimeter you can't expose a lot before you get some blurring, as we'll review here, but you can definitely shoot with the Nifty 50. This is where a fast and a slow lens, what they're referring to, a slow lens typically is for f4 and above, or a fast lens starts at 2.8. And the way I like to think of this, let's say at f4 you're buying $1 worth of light. At f2 you're buying $2 worth of light. f4 you're buying $4 worth of light, and f1.4 you're buying $8 worth of light. And so you wonder why the guy who's shooting at f1.4 is getting better photos than you do. Well, he paid probably 8 times as much for the lens as well. But he's definitely getting in a lot more light. Now there's tricks and ways around it. And there's some good inexpensive lenses. Rokinon is well known in the astrophotography world as inexpensive lenses. Dave Card, I think you just bought a Rokinon lens there. What was that? A 1.8? Maybe Dave's not there, but definitely you can get some good inexpensive lenses there.
It's a 2.4.
2.4?
Yeah.
Which will get you $3 worth of light, approximately.
There are also, I think, I have the Tamron 18 millimeter. It's kind of a bit of a fisheye lens, but it's a f1.4, and I think Frank used it when we went out to Joshua Tree, and I love that lens, and it's Tamron. It's not that expensive. It's kind of considered their art glass.
Got it.
And the lens I was using was the Sigma.
Sigma, I'm sorry. It is Sigma.
Sigma 14 millimeter 1.8.
Yeah.
Which is an astounding piece of glass, but so is its price. I had borrowed it from Sigma. It's on my shopping list.
Yes, definitely had a comma in it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I get numbers mixed up. Even that, I said F14 and 18, and it was a 14, and I'm pretty bad with numbers.
Yes, so you definitely get your sharpness and your fastness. You definitely pay a premium for, but your results are going to be that much better as well. There are 3 kinds of, at least 3 kinds. There's your for intervalometers. This is helpful, especially when you're doing star trails, but it's also helpful in any nighttime photography. So you're just not touching the camera. One is your traditional external. Then you have your internal that's built inside the camera. And then there are external ones as well on the iPhone app. So this over here, I was using the, just slipped my mind, Trigger Trap. They don't make it anymore. Myops is the replacement version for that. But that's, you use a phone app for that. Which is handy. I find that to be extremely helpful. So you need an intervalometer, or if you're just taking pictures of the Milky Way, doing a 2-second pause or a 3-second pause or a 10-second pause on your camera before, just that helps settle everything down, make sure that you're not going to get any blur. So if you ever forget your intervalometer and are taking pictures of the Milky Way, that's a good trick. Other things to bring. Proper clothing. Now, proper clothing depends on where you're going. So, for example, Rick Strobo and I, we went to Joshua Tree a couple weeks ago. I was wearing my long johns, my pajamas, and my jeans, 2 hats and a glove. So that was proper clothing for there. But I've also been down to Borrego, where it was 114. And so proper clothing for there was a little bit different. So depending on where you're going and what time of year, usually layering is always a good idea. So you can, depending on what the wind is, but layering is a good idea, but make sure you're dressed appropriately. I'm big into snacks. I like to make sure that I'm well snacked before I go out. Make sure you're bringing your some water, especially if you're going to desert areas. Caffeinated drinks if you're trying to stay up late. Some people go with the coffee drinks. I'm more of a soda guy, but do your Mountain Dew or whatever it is that you're going to do. Folding chairs are very helpful, especially if you're doing star trails because there's not a lot of moving around. And then a printed map, again, depending on where you're going to go, having something printed is going to help because there may not be cell phone coverage.
Bruce,
Right.
there's
Yes.
another thing to be considering too. And Frank, I'm going to need your help on this. There's one part of the Joshua Tree that you better be very careful with because the plants will attack you.
I think you're talking about yes, down in the is it the Coachella? Yes, I agree. The spines jump out at you and they stick.
For those areas,
You're talking about the Choya Garden.
Choya
Yes.
Garden, there you go.
yes. If you're going anywhere near there, make sure you have a pair of pliers with you.
That's a good idea. I'll have to add that to my list. Either my list to avoid or my as a place or a tool to add to my kit. Star parties are a great place to get started. The astronomy guys, they know all the dark skies, and it's helpful to go out with some friends who could point you in the right direction. They're very helpful. I never knew what a star party was until I thought maybe it was like a rave out in the desert, but it's actually a bunch of astro nerds, and they bring out their gear. Very helpful, all kinds, all different sizes, but they know the night skies, and it's always nice to go out with friends and people who can help you, especially in the beginning. And so this was one of my first pictures out in this was Pioneer Town, out in the Conservancy area, and you can see here I got a picture of the Big Dipper. And the Astro guys are so cool because you're always looking for good foreground images, and they have some of the best gear. You never know what they're going to pull out. And this was up in Big Bear, and this guy, it looked like it was a rocket launcher with a telescope, and just a lot of fun there. So scorpion hunting, I mentioned that earlier. First time I went out, somebody said, "Do you want to go scorpion hunting?" And I thought, ha ha, trick the new guy. This must be like cow tipping or something. And they're not going to fool me. And as soon as they turned on the black lights, there was a giant scorpion literally 5 feet away from me. And I jumped like you could never believe. I didn't realize that this was an actual thing or that they were actually in the desert. And so since then, I've come to embrace it. I took one of my sons out to Joshua Tree. We actually found 99 scorpions in one night. Now I was shooting the stars. They were hunting scorpions with a flashlight, but they are everywhere. And if you don't bother them, they won't bother you. But just know that they're out there. So a black light is handy. Okay. Nighttime shooting etiquette. This is really critical. When you go out, especially to popular places, it could be like Grand Central Station. This was a star trail that I was working on, and I tell you, there was just people in and out of there. This was the final results after I did all my editing. But you have to be aware that other people are going to want to shoot where you are, and it's just say, is anyone exposing? That is just a very kind thing to say. So if somebody is, well, just, okay, just let me know when you're done, or, how long do you have to go? And they'll let you know, oh, you got another 30 seconds if they're doing, good. And then just wait your 30 seconds and then just let them know. Just talk back and forth. The chatter back and forth is extremely helpful. My friend Steve, he was testing out his light wand, and I think this could light up half of Joshua Tree. Don't bring this to a star party. You'll never be invited again, guaranteed. I was out in Borrego with a couple of friends, and we were shooting. We saw these guys shooting the scorpion. They were already there. I don't know how long they were there. We introduced ourselves. We said hello. They knew that we wanted to shoot it. 10 minutes went by, 15 minutes went by, 20 minutes went by, half an hour went by. They thought it was their very personal sculpture. And that's just rude, especially when you know that there are people that are waiting. So plan your image, take your image, and move on. This is one of my favorite places to shoot. What you can't see, on the shelf that I'm sitting, there's about 10 people all crammed in there. And there was a guy who had gotten there earlier. His name was Sean Danger, and that's his Instagram handle. And he thought this was his own. He was taking a time lapse, an all-night time lapse. And he was very upset that we were there. And he decided to stand right here in protest while we all yelled at him. He thought that was a good idea. Don't be that guy, you know. Let other people shoot. If you want to do some light painting, let people know what's going on. Usually they'll appreciate, maybe they'll take advantage of what you're doing, but just talk back and forth. Okay, any questions from what I've gone over so far? Do you have any nightmare stories of people being an idiot? I think the darker it gets, the more stupid people get. But there's some real characters out there. Don't be one of those guys. Okay, camera settings. Make sure you turn your lens image stabilization off. Now, sometimes it's in the camera. On the new Sonys, they have it in some of the mirrorless. They're inside. Most of us still have it on the lens itself. Make sure you turn it off, especially if you're on a tripod. What's going to happen is the image stabilization is doing a little bit of motion, and when you put it on a tripod, it just exacerbates that. So this was very unfortunate. I had the entire arch to myself, and I came back with 100% blurry pictures. So this was a very disappointed evening just because I forgot to turn my image stabilization off. Also turn your autofocus off. When you're focusing at night, you want to make sure that your autofocus is off because there's typically not enough contrast for your autofocus to kick in. Now there's a couple ways to focus because what you're going to want is sharp stars, not big, fat, blurry, round blobs. You want sharp stars. A couple ways to go about this. The easiest way is to go into live view, click on to 10 times, and then go ahead and focus till you get the sharpest point. That's going to be your easiest view. Make sure that you have your settings, high ISOs. That'll help you see a star. And make sure every time you move from one case to another, go ahead and refocus because you don't know it was bumped. You don't want to waste all that drive time and all that, all that shooting time with blurry stars. Another way to focus is to focus ahead of time, then use some gaffer tape and tape it down. Or literally just have somebody have a flashlight and shine it far away and focus on the farthest thing away. That's another way to focus. Frank, you got any tips there on focusing?
Yes, focus before it gets real dark. And then use gaffer tape to lock the focus.
Yep. Yeah, that's very helpful. The other way is the live view, like I'm showing here, and but either way will get you sharp stars. Okay, noise reduction, on or off, depends what you're doing. Typically, Milky Way, you're going to have it off But what that's going to do, it's going to take a dark frame and it's going to add twice the time. So let's say you're doing a 30-second exposure. It will actually take a 30 and then another 30, so you have a 60-second exposure. So you got to watch that. If you're doing Milky Way only and you're new, I would say go ahead and put it on. If you're doing meteors and star trails, I'd say take it off. So we're all familiar with the exposure triangle. With Milky Way shooting and nighttime shooting, we're working with extremes. We're way on the other end of the extremes. We also have a moving object that we're shooting. The night sky is, as the Earth spins, it's a moving object. So we need a fast lens, like we talked about before. Make sure you have your fast lens. Wide lens helps, and you'll see here why. Out there on the internet, if you look around, you'll find the rule of 600 or the rule of 500. Frank introduced me to the rule of 400, which is actually much more accurate. And actually, there's fancy programs that you dial in your camera and your lens, and it'll tell you exactly to the half of a second how much you're allowed to put on. But this is the maximum number of seconds before stars start to blur due to the Earth's rotation. So for an example, let's say you have a 24mm lens. So we divide that into 400, that gives us 16 seconds. So that's how long you can shoot before this pinpoint star starts to elongate and blur. Now, if you're shooting star trails, that's actually what you're wanting. You're wanting to see that blur. But if you're shooting Milky Way, you want your stars nice and sharp. If you have a 14mm lens, and this is where you can see a wider lens allows you to go for more seconds. So almost, not quite twice the time, but that's a lot more time. Now you do have to adjust. If you have a crop sensor, you have to adjust for that. So that same 24mm lens on a crop sensor, that's going to give you, oh, I don't think I did my, oh, that's the millimeter there. And so you take 38mm into 400, and that gives you 10 seconds. That's not a lot of light. Again, compared to this guy over here who could shoot for 28 seconds, and you're shooting for 10 seconds, that's 2.5 times more light that the person with the wider, faster lens is going to get. So keep that in mind as well. ISO, most modern cameras can handle high ISOs, 6400, 10,000. Part of the problem, depending on where you're shooting, you may end up with the light pollution causing too much, you might be capturing too much light pollution. So if you're just getting started, you don't know what camera settings to do, this is what I recommend just to get you started. ISO 3200, f-stop 2.8, 30 seconds. You'll definitely get a picture of the Milky Way. Now, it may not be the best picture of the Milky Way. You may need to dial it in a little bit more, but these will definitely get you some Milky Way. Let me pause here. Any questions on camera settings? This is what this part trips a lot of people up.
I was just curious about noise reduction, and I didn't understand that, like why you would set it on for the Milky Way and off for star trails. What didn't make sense to me. If you could explain it.
Sure. With Milky Ways, you're taking a single shot. With star trails, you're taking a picture of the star, and then another picture of the star, and then another picture of the star, and another picture of the star, and that's going to give you your trail. If you take a picture, and then let's say I take a 30-second picture, and then I have a 30-second wait, and then I take another picture and have a 30-second wait, and another picture, I'm going to have these gaps in my star trails. So star trails, you want to be smooth with your, you want smooth star trails. So you don't want those gaps. So we're going to talk about there when we're talking about star trails.
Okay.
But with the black frame,
Bruce,
that
if
helps
I
with
might add,
go ahead.
some cameras have two different kinds of noise reduction. There's long exposure noise reduction, which is what you're talking about here. And there's also high ISO noise reduction, which can be used for either Milky Way or star trails.
Right.
That's good to note. So with those settings, this is the settings that I was using. If you recognize this as Joshua Tree, there's Skull Rock with the Milky Way beautifully behind it. Same camera settings, Borrego, white milk or white tank in Joshua Tree. So you could shoot vertical as well. This was up in Big Bear, YMCA camp with the Milky Way behind it with all the red lights coming. This was my very first Milky Way arch. And at the RTMC, which is the Riverside Telescope Manufacturing Club or Manufacturer Club, Willie Pachoka was one of the speakers there, and he was selling he was going to be giving a talk and was selling his wares. And this guy he's world famous, 45 times on the NASA astrophotography of the day. I mean, so the guy knows what he's doing. I was just oohing and ahhing over his arch pictures, his Milky Way arch pictures, and go, oh, this is really easy. Would you like to know about it? And I'm just jumping out of my skin, looking for a pen, wanting something to write on. It was, yes. Is this how you do it? You take your camera, you turn it vertical, and you go to one end and you take a picture. And then you're going to move over where there's about a 50% overlap. And you take another picture. And you just keep doing that. And you put it into Lightroom and you say, match it up. And what do you know? It does, just like your normal panorama. This is the exact same technique as a panorama. And Bruce, you were asking earlier about, does the moon help? This picture actually had the Milky Way, the moon was setting, and that helped light my foreground in this photo here. So definitely it can help. But yeah, just take do a normal panorama, 50% overlap, and you can see here what we were talking about. This is the core over on the right. The rest of the Milky Way is here, and it just gets lighter and lighter as you go to the left. All right, star trails and meteors, very similar. And they're super fun to capture. Some of my favorite things. Definitely turn your noise reduction off. Again, the reason you don't want gaps as you're taking you want those right together so that you get a nice smooth trail. You're going to want your intervalometer. This really comes in handy when you're doing your intervalometer. That's going to you're going to set your ISO. You can lower your ISO. We don't need all of the background. We're not trying to shoot the Milky Way and get all the nebulosity and all that detail. So you can lower your ISO. You can also lower your f-stop, or I guess increase your f-stop to f4 is typically what I shoot at. That gives me a little bit sharper around the corners. I don't have as much vignetting. And again, 30 seconds will get you started. Some people like to shoot longer. I still like to have relatively sharp stars in case I capture something interesting flying in the sky. I want to make sure I have sharp skies. And again, your intervalometer, the lower you can make it. Some of the intervalometers, the least, the minimum setting is a second, and that's fine. That'll get you going. On mine, I'm able to set it to 0.2 of a second, and that just, again, I'm able to take one picture right after the other. And if you have a full frame, you want to go at least for 60 minutes in order to get enough stars to get a good star trail. So how do you find it? You got to find the North Star. And again, you're going to use your little app, type in Polaris, you use the little compass, it'll tell you where to go. And you can do some very creative things with star trails depending on where you're pointing. You can zoom in. You can go to the left, you can go to the right. I wanted to know what happens if you turned exactly opposite away. So instead of pointing to the North Star, point exactly opposite. And the stars actually go sideways. I was super surprised at that. Just real quick here to edit, there's several ways. Once you have all your photos, use one of these programs. Again, the price is right. Star Stacks or Star Trails. One of them has a version for the Mac. I forget which one it is. But you just load all your photos. You load your photos here on the left. You say lighten it without gaps. And again, that's going to help make them smoother. Just helps make them smoother rather than those gaps in the middle between one right after the other. And let it do its thing. And voila, you have a star trail. And I think you mentioned airplane trails. Those are a problem. This is what you're going to get. And there's lots of airplane trails. So you got to remove those. And it's right now, it's a manual job. I can't wait till Photoshop comes up with the remove the airplane trails. I'll probably have to, I'm not holding my breath, but that would be a good thing if they ever did. And there are, if you're going to do star trails, you have to get good at this. This was out in the desert. And I thought this one, maybe it was a UFO, maybe, who knows? But then I was wondering, what's this glow over here? And I don't know how long, ended up being Las Vegas. Oh, that was the glow from Las Vegas. But star trails, star trails, star trails. And, us being near Ontario and LAX, there's a lot that come through. So simplest way to do it, you open a single photo and you take a black pen and you draw right over it. That is your absolute simplest way. And you just go photo by photo by photo and you open it. So whether you open it as layers in Photoshop or open them up one at a time, which is how I used to do it, just put a black. Now I like to use, and that's, it'll clean it up, which is nice. Now I like to use a pin light technique where my top layer, and it gives a nice little swooshy thing. But you can see here, this technique of using the black doesn't work for that. You end up with big old black lines. So another way to do it is get a thin brush and use the heel tool. That's a pretty big brush that I'm showing here on the screen for demo purposes. But just use a small one and use the heel tool. That's another way to go about it. And when you do that, you get a much better result. Now this was one of my first times out shooting star trails, and I thought, my word, I'm shooting the meteors, and I got 1, 2 meteors in a night in the same photo. I am a genius. I thought I was just the cat's meow. So I looked it up. This is one of my favorite articles on the internet, why your streak is probably not a meteor. And this keeps you humble. So you take it, you see it, you're excited about it. So a couple of things you need to look for. One, it could be a satellite. And what you do is you make sure you go back and forth and you see the satellite. And there's a lot more satellites in the sky. Elon Musk just put up a bunch of them. And astrophotographers around the world are, you'll hear them whining about it, but there's definitely a lot more satellite problems. This one I was sure because real meteor tapers. And I said, look, this is tapering. So that must be a meteor. So this, if it has blinking lights, you know that's normal airplane. But you go back and forth, and you can see here, this second one continued from the first one, back and forth. And so, if it's going over a minute long, meteors are just fractions, seconds in the sky. This wasn't it. Now this was a meteor. It both had tapered ends here, and it had the copper that was blowing out, so it had the right color. And this actually made it into the Focus on the Universe display at the University of Riverside. This was a Nice, nice display. I wish I would have taken this or this, but this was my picture down over here. So plan C, you always have to have a plan C. You've heard of plan B, this is plan C, clouds. Clouds can be your friend when it comes to sunsets, but clouds can be a bane when it comes to nighttime photography. But sometimes you're already out there, you have set, you set your goal, you set your time, you've already made your travel plans, and you're going out there, you're itching to go, but you can still take some fun photos. There's some beautiful images that you can take, even with some skies. This was Death Valley. I went there for the Dark Sky Festival to take pictures of the Milky Way and the stars under the darkest skies possible. And there was 100% cloud cover. So it was very disappointing. This here is in the lowest point in the United States on the salt flats there. And so when you can't take pictures of the sky, take pictures of the people. So again, have plan C. Two websites that I use to help plan this. One, to help plan and kind of predict what the skies are going to look like. One is Clear Dark Skies. And what that does is it takes hour by hour, it takes a slice. And so the darker you go, there's a whole, it shows you what the different colors mean. But you can see over here, this is going to be a terrible, since it's all white, this is 100% cloud cover here. This is daytime over here, but you look hour by hour, and this helps figure it out. This is a lot of astronomers use this one. This is one that I ran into after doing a pretty extensive search of all the web apps. You go, and I don't know how they pronounce it. Ventusky is how I've been doing it. Ventusky.com. You look at the cloud area, and you zoom in, and it'll show you, oh, there's going to be 80% clouds over here, 60% clouds over here, 20% cloud. It'll show you the percentages, and I found this to be very helpful. And it also lets you go hour by hour, and then pick dates into the future. But like all weather predicting apps, there can be some problems. Have fun. I use this same technique for Christmas lights, and it's a really fun where you're doing a long exposure and then very gently move the focus if you're using a variable lens. You can get some fun shots. Light painting. There's light painting the object, and then there's light painting the light. I had a lot of fun with that. Well, I did a dress up with my friend Dave Maupin. He's the wizard of the stars. He's really good. He knows his stars, and so we went out to. We had planned this for almost a year, and it was, 90% stark cloud cover. So you just have fun with it. Just go with it. This was a fidget spinner that I was using to make this down over here. This was light painting that I used, and then I did it on the ground, and then photoshopped it up. So you can have fun with it. This was a lens ball. You're trying to capture the Milky Way here in a lens ball, and you can actually get it. And then lasers. Who doesn't like lasers? Make sure you're closing your eyes, and the guy knows that you're shooting at him. But having fun with lasers in the dark is always a good thing. Always didn't go well. This was early on, before I knew how to focus. All I knew how to do was aim at the stars. I didn't know how to focus quite yet. So this was a unfocused opportunity. This was a light painting opportunity. I thought a little was good, more is better, and absolutely blew out my foreground. And so that's where I learned that little goes a long way, especially when it comes to light painting. Remember those scorpion hunters I was telling you? They marched right through my, this was them searching right in front of my camera, trying to find those scorpions. And I think this is where they found one, right there. It was quite exciting. Shooting one of the blood moons. This was, I learned about don't rush. I was in a hurry. I was coming up to Oak Glen. you know, I had some car trouble, and I just, you know, it was just about to peak. I ran, set up my equipment real fast, and just absolutely totally blew the shot because I was in a rush. And so when you have an opportunity, get there early, take your time, have your mental checklist, and get the shot. This was up in Big Bear. Again, early in my, I forgot which way the f-stop went, whether it went up or down. And I went the wrong way. I also found out, I'm not sure if you can see this on the Zoom though, but there's some circles here. This is lens correction turned on. One of the tips that I found is don't turn lens correction on your astrophotography until you're all done. Make sure you're doing all your blending, put them all together, and then put on your lens correction. Otherwise, you'll get some very funky aberrations. So here's some of my favorites. I enjoy putting together calendars. I've done a Redlands calendar for 5 years. This is my second astrophotography calendar. And getting 12 good shots in a year, in a season that's very, very short is challenging. Shooting the moon, this is a composite, obviously, showing the moon right here in Redlands, come up over Yucaipa. Joshua Tree. This was a picture that I was trying to recreate. I saw this on the Joshua Tree website. So this is the north entrance on the east side there, late in the season. The arch, over the arch, this is one of my favorite places to shoot. It's typically very crowded, and you kind of have to do a little bit of bouldering, so you need to be able to have some maneuvering. But the arch, over the arch. This is up in Jenks Lake, shooting the Perseus meteor shower. I'd always faced the other direction. I never thought about turning around to the Milky Way, except into this last year, and it's like, lo and behold, you could actually see the Milky Way. So I always turn around. That's some of the best shots were, you know, turn around. Sometimes the best shots behind you. But I was able to get this shot with the meteor and the Milky Way. This is a single shot, not composite. Friend of mine, Steve Carroll, he's also better known as Redlands Sky. We went out to Borrego, and if you look at the lighting on this, we were lighting these with a drone, which was, it's like your own portable moon. It was just an incredible opportunity. So the light source is from above coming down. You can see the shadows down here, but then using that for the foreground and then shooting the background was just a fun thing to do. This is last year in Borrego, different part. Again, this is a photograph that I had seen that I was trying to recreate, put my own twist on it. You can see back here the Milky Way. This is late in the season, and you know that for two reasons. One, it's vertical, so that means it's later in the season. And two, the core is not shown. The core is below the horizon, so the core is down in here. So you still were able to get a beautiful shot. This is something recent I've been doing. I've been borrowing a friend's super long lens and trying to get some super zoom on the moon. Actually, I would be shooting out tonight, except I was giving a talk, and there's no, you can't see the moon. Joshua, this is Death Valley. I mentioned that there was 100% cloud cover. It was up until 3:30 in the morning, and I had 1 hour before sunrise would start to interfere. So I had light painted while there were still clouds, where the clouds were moving. So I light painted the foreground, and then moved in this is one of my trackers, using my star tracker for the background. And then lastly, this was just almost 3 weeks ago. Rick Strobo and I went out past Joshua Tree. used a LED light to light the foreground, and then shot the background. And so I've come a long way. It's been a fun journey and a fun ride. Appreciate you guys letting me share my story. So what questions do you have?
Hey,
Okay,
Bruce.
question with regard to the your camera when you're taking these. Do you want to block off the light from your viewfinder?
I find that that's helpful, especially if you're having, you don't need to if you're in dark skies and you're not shining your flashlight inside the viewfinder. But if you're wearing a light on your hat, if you're wearing a headlamp and you forget to take it off, that's probably a good thing to do. But it's also a good thing to turn it off while you're exposing.
Hey,
Bruce, can you tell us more about your star tracker?
My star tracker, this is where I wish I was in person. I'm using an iOptron. Dave Fickey has the same one that I do. He actually got his first, but I think I used it first. As the stars are moving, or as the Earth is moving, the stars appear to move. And so what the star tracker does is it moves the camera at the exact same speed that the stars are moving. So what that allows you to do is focus on one area of the sky for much, much longer. So remember we had, if I was shooting at f4, if I only have an f4 lens, but I need more light, so I'm capped. Let's say I'm 24 millimeter. Let's say I'm capped at 30 seconds, just for simplicity of math. Well, if I want more light, I either have to move this down, or typically we would move this number up. But if I go up, I'm stuck at, I'm stuck. I'm not going to get sharp stars. So what the star tracker allows me to get on a wide angle, I can do up to 3 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes exposures. So what that allows me to do is rather than shooting at 6400, I'm able to shoot down at 800. So my dynamic range goes up, my noise goes down, and I'm getting much better results for just purely background. But that's not that's one of those next level things. I had it on my list for about 2 years, and finally Santa Claus brought it for me for Christmas. But it's a fun thing. I've only used it twice on the Milky Way so far. Once in once in Death Valley. By the time I had it all set up, because there is some weight to it. By the time I had it all set up, I was able to take one image, and that's actually, I took one image and ran out of time before the sun started to rise. So you have to polar align it.
Another limitation of a tracking unit, of course, is that you can't shoot anything in the foreground because it will be a blur.
Correct, which means you have to then do a composite, which means your Photoshop skills have to be up to par.
And they should be anyway. A star tracker is also on my shopping list.
Well, come out with me, Frank, and I'll let you borrow it, because it's a fun thing to try.
So,
Hey, Bruce.
thank you.
Bruce, when you do the light painting, for the foreground, are you using a strobe?
No, I'm actually using an LED panel.
Okay.
And that allows me, and this is where we didn't talk about light painting in terms of the foreground. We just concentrated on the skies. For the foreground, I'm actually using, I changed my settings totally for the foreground. So I'm using ISO 800 with a f-stop of f8. And what that allows me to do is get a much more dynamic range, much more depth of field, and a much sharper foreground image. And I use a pretty bright LED light, and I use it about a 45-degree angle. That's a whole nother class.
Bruce, on your star trails, when you showed some of the pictures, your better pictures of them, how many images were those composed of?
Well, let's say if you're taking 30-second shots and you're shooting for an hour, they're about 120 to 180. The guys that I really like and really follow, they shoot for 8 hours or more, which is a whole lot of airplane trails. But right now with the coronavirus, there's a lot less less airplanes out there. Just saying.
Out in Death Valley, are there less of the airplane trails?
Yes, because they're not near LAX.
Okay, good.
For sure. So I'm planning on doing a talk. Russ, we didn't talk about this. Am I good to go for in 2 weeks?
Yes, you are.
Okay. This is going to be totally dedicated to editing Milky Way. I'm going to be in Lightroom and in Star Stacks, and showing you step by step on how to, both in Photoshop and how I edit my Milky Way shot. So I'm going to take some of my befores and afters, and I'm going to walk you through step by step on how to do it. So there'll be a Zoom meeting link next week. If you'd like to be a fly on the wall, watch over my shoulder as I edit the Milky Way and edit the star trails.
Next week or 2 weeks?
2 weeks. April the 20th at 7 p.m. Thanks for catching that.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your kindness of your attention. Hopefully you've picked up a thing or two. I'll be hanging out for the next 10, 15 minutes so if you have different questions to ask, but we're officially done. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you,
and
Bruce.
It was great to have you.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Bruce.
Bruce.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Bruce. This is Stan.
Come again?
Hello. Bruce, this is Stan.
Hey, Stan, how are you?
Fine. How you doing?
Okie doke.
How about some critiques of some shots that we've taken?
That would be great. Do you have some?
Yes. I'll
Yeah,
share. Hold on.
I turned sharing off
Okay.
for security purposes. I don't want any spammers. Let me see if I can figure out how to turn that on. One participant can share at a time. Multiple participants. Advanced sharing options. Okay. All participants can share. Okay. You should be able to go, I believe, maybe, possibly. Do I have to turn it over to you?
No.
You can share?
Yeah, I just got to go find it.
Okay. Carl, I didn't see you there. Good to have you.
Well done, Bruce. I really enjoyed that. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it, Carl. I know you have some nice night sky images as well.
Yes, I do. Thanks to Frank especially.
Okay, I should be sharing here. Let me know when you can see them.
Okay, I can see it. Good. This is, I'm guessing, is this the Toronas?
Yes.
I could.
Mars on the left and Jupiter on the right.
Oh, you gotta love. I love when you can get some good planets in there.
There's a second one there. It should be up now.
Oh, good. And it looks like a satellite possibly in the upper right.
Yeah, I think so. I wasn't too picky about it.
Yep. And sometimes the sky glow in the back actually adds an extra dimension. So I'm not too.
Right. It made the pinnacles stick out really good.
Exactly. And so that's good there. And you got a nice, good core. A nice, good. Whoa. Look at that.
That's
moonshot.
my back. That's from my backyard, and it's HDR'd.
Very nice. What millimeter are you using?
I have a Nikon 200 to 500 f6. It's probably at f14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's 3-shot, HDR.
Beautiful.
And I think that's all I uploaded.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. This is one of the nice things that we can do here virtually. It's a lot easier since we have the computers with us and our stash of photos fast to share. That's awesome.